Okay, I think we should go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with Brother Evans.
Okay. Revolutionary greetings, everyone. On behalf of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we would like to give praise and express our gratitude to the African masses who have never failed to answer a call to battle. We give thanks and praise to our audience on what the All African People's Revolutionary Party, or AAPRP-GC,
Unmuted.
sees as another historic moment for our people. We never tire in our desire to make our humble contribution towards the political education and organization of the masses of African people worldwide. We are honored with the presence of some of our allies in struggle, our sister party, the Parti de la Révolution Populaire Africain de Guinée, the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, Victory to the People Guyana, the Osagefyo Youth Movement Ghana, and the Friends of the Congo. It is the plan of the AAPRP-GC to institutionalize the Kwame Ture Commemoration and Nkrumah Tourism Ideological Seminar to heighten and advance ideological struggle focused on Pan-Africanism. It is but our modest contribution to the African Revolution. The AAPRP-GC believes that humanist, egalitarian, collectivist, Pan-Africanist, and socialist ideological struggle and work is the basis for the advancement of African people towards ideological unity and unity of struggle. We understand that the exact nature of the struggle of African people and in Africa and in the African diaspora is revolutionary in character. So we commemorate the life, service, suffering, and sacrifice of Kwame Ture and simultaneously honor Osagefyo, Kwame Nkrumah, Ahmed Sekou Toure, Patrice Lumumba, and Roberto Mangaliso Sobukwe. Today, we have organized a discussion of African organizations and political parties to provide their insight to our people and to express willingness to inherit and continue Kwame Ture's directive. If Africa's children cannot alleviate her suffering, we can at least share them fully. This principle will be highlighted throughout the education concerning the revolutionary contributions, suffering, service, and sacrifice of our honorees. It is the responsibility of the AAPRP-GC to educate and cultivate support for all progressive and revolutionary African organizations that are struggling for our people. Pan-African unity and international solidarity is the Pan-Africanist thing to do. The AAPRP-GC has the responsibility to inspire those who are not inside an organization to join one immediately. The critical necessity of joining a progressive revolutionary organization fighting for the liberation of the African masses worldwide must be a popular idea among the masses of our people. Nkrumah says it most clearly: there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. I will now turn the seminar over to our moderator for today, Banbosi Shango, organizer for the AAPRP-GC, and again, we are grateful for you spending this time with us today.
Again, we thank everybody for coming out today. And we are extremely happy to see so many folks on. And currently there are 23 people on. We want to see if we can put in place right now a video. I think that in lieu of waiting for Mr. Conde, I see that the brother from the Osagefyo Youth Movement is on. Maybe we can start there, and in the meantime, in the background, we'll do some other work. So, Omama, are you on?
Yeah, brother, I'm on.
All right.
How are you?
I'm doing good, brother. We want to see if we can start out with you and your presentation.
Yeah, I'm Omama Amankwa Appiah. It's not Appiah Amankwa, it's Amankwa Appiah. And I'm the president of the Osagefyo Youth Movement. We are the mainland, so to speak. And as far as we are concerned, it's devoted to that to our respect for the African. We, the OIM, emphasizes the need for the youth of Ghana and Africa as a whole to seek proper knowledge and provide a platform to share such knowledge for the betterment of Africa and the promotion of social justice globally. Again, we testify to the truth that Ghana and Africa's independence was obtained through a brave struggle of some brave warriors of decolonization. Thus, the movement speaks and encourages all, that is, the good people of Africa, to speak of the sacrifices and bravery of our forebears with utmost respect and love. In this instance, we would like to dwell on the Osagefyo Kwame Nkrumah and what he intends for Ghana and Africa as a whole. You know, the vision of Nkrumah can be understood within the context to action and well-being for Ghana and Africa after independence. No, the OIM wants to take the youth of Africa down the memory lane for them to know what was intended for Africa, Ghana and Africa through Nkrumahism, and why Ghana and most are in such helpless and hopeless situation. The Osagefyo asserted that Africans are equally creatures of the Almighty God who also created the white. Therefore, as Africans, he made us understand that we have the right to govern ourselves in our own God-given land. And we have the right to live as men. This was a clarion call. And this was a very important statement, for it revealed the principle of the universal dignity of man as the master and manager of all created things in the world. This was Nkrumah's assertion. An understanding of this principle is very essential for a full appreciation of what Osagefyo says and does, because his words and actions are backed by the single authority of both black and white are by divine nature created equal. And the black man, when given the chance, is capable of managing every situation, however complex it may be, with equal dignity as a white man would. And this is pertinent. But the sad and unfortunate thing is that we, the present generation of Nkrumahs or Pan-Africanists or African revolutionaries, have lost touch with our supposed real self. That is, with the power of thought, with the force to engineer, create, and attain anything we may think of ourselves. The present-day Nkrumahs or Pan-Africanists have lost touch with reality. And that is the reality in knowing or acknowledging that every single action of man begins from a thought. So says Kwame Nkrumah. And that the thoughts we emit from our minds are powerful tools. So therefore, when we think wisely, we would in the process be using light and knowledge of positive thinking to remove ignorance. As a result, we will be moving from the path of congenial failures toward the road of success, where creativity will begin to unfold. So therefore, in the leadership of the Pan-Africanist movement, there ought to be strategic leadership, strategic management, strategic planning, strategic thinking, and strategic implementation, according to Osagefyo. We, the latter-day Pan-Africanists, have to nurture great thoughts because creation began with a thought. And we are all thoughts of our Creator. And this power is truly the biggest legacy the Osagefyo bequeathed to the present-day generation. So for the youth, a big, small trip down the memory lane. Plainly, in the sight of the imagination at the time, the Osagefyo, with this African personality concept, beheld the new forces elevating society from its very foundation. That is, lifting the poorest above the possibility of want and exempting the very lowest from the anxiety of the material needs of life. And out of the bounteous natural resources the country was endowed with, the Osagefyo envisaged as a necessary sequence moral conditions, realizing the golden age of which mankind had always dreamt. And by the golden age, we mean an era where the youth no longer stunt and starve as we have today, where foul, immoral, and indecent flee from society, where fierce things become tamed and discord turns into harmony. That was where we were heading towards. This is because vice, ignorance, crime, and brutality that spring from poverty and the fear of poverty cannot exist where poverty has vanished. This was Osagefyo Kwame Nkrumah. As we talk, we believe that Nkrumahism carries the weight of the world on its shoulders as far as the solutions to Africa's economic development issues are concerned. The youth should be told that Nkrumahism as a development philosophy is as vital today as it was during the time that it was revealed. The message is eternal for all times and all people. Its message rains down through the ages as an inspiration and pathway for our stumbling feet. The sacred truth is that the present-day Ghanaians, especially the youth of Africa, have not come to terms with our destiny as a people. We have not developed a sense of appreciation of who we are and what legacy we have to uphold. Therefore, the Osagefyo youth movement make this appeal from the perspective of development philosophy for the achievement of our national development policy guideline that is founded on the history of our dear country. It's appealing to the need to seek knowledge in Nkrumahism as an instrument of national or Pan-African emancipation and integrity. So we sort of encourage the African youth to look inner belief and this man to be himself. History encourages man to know who we were, where we got into, how far we've come, and where we need to go. Because if you don't know where you're coming from, you wouldn't know where you want to go or where you are going. So we entreat the African youth to unite and pay attention to the revival of the soul in humanly comforting and life-saving philosophy of Nkrumah. Nkrumah, as far as the Osagefyo is concerned, has a lot of tenets, and that it enunciates that every society is placed in nature, that society seeks to influence nature to impose such transformation upon nature, as well as develop the environment of the society for better fulfillment. It states that the law of nature, humans, we must follow this law the same as plants and other forms of life. Nkrumah avers that, and in this context, we mean the Ghanaian, and for that matter, the African, it's not a machine that will do so much, and no human being is not an animal whose powers may reach. It is the mind, not musk, which is the great agent involved, is the weakest of all. But for the human intelligence, the resistant currents of nature flow, and matter becomes plastic to the human world. That is Nkrumah. Nkrumah teaches that the African personality concept is anchored on the African conscience, conditioned by its experiences with Euro-Christianity, Arab Islamic thought, and indigenous original African worldview. Thus, for Africa as a whole, a new African philosophy must draw its nourishment chiefly from African roots, which is essentially egalitarian, meaning equal rights, and I mean equal rights in its proper or real sense. Nkrumah expatiates that every new power engaged in the service of humans should improve the conditions of all. And he is talking about decent standards of living for everybody. Because as human beings, there's a human life we ought to live. And this should be healthy, happy human life, which the Osagefyo tried to establish in Ghana with the vanguard being work and happiness. The youth should know that we were on track. We were on the right course. But unfortunately, as that in order to increase their intelligence must be increased. And here, the brain must also be brought to the aid of the hand to engage in the common work of life. So, Nkrumah emphasizes that the brain maketh man, and that as Africans, we were equally created by the same one. What a white man, a yellow African achieved, if not even better. This was Nkrumah, and it still is Nkrumah. Nkrumah teaches that to free others from servitude and oppression is a great form of service that leads to huge reward from providence. The reason for this is that such acts of kindness will establish an environment of love and affection in society and lead to spiritual progress and be a means of gaining the blessing of providence. So therefore, if we may remind the youth, in Ghana, something got started. That is, Nkrumah in Ghana created an atmosphere where the rights of others, that's the common majority, superseded the demand for one's own rights. The concern of all being the concern of one, and the concern of one being the concern of all. And that the level of consciousness and sensitivity to fellow human beings, which was comradeship and forbearance, was raised to a degree whereby members of society as a whole were concerned more about what they owe society rather than what society owed them. And this was Nkrumah. Nkrumah tried to restructure Africa to our past glory. The glory that people like Lord Macaulay of the UK came to meet. That he globe-trotted, or he traversed the whole of Africa, and nowhere did he ever see a thief. Did he ever see a murderer? People of such caliber, high moral standards, virtuous people with riches in abundance. And that he advised the UK or the English people that if they don't come out in a way to turn the African thinking into believing that whatever or all what is Africa is not good except what is from them, there's no way they are able to conquer Africa. And this, they surreptitiously, clandestinely, carefully planned and made Africa what Africa is today through the importation of Euro Christianity. Euro Christianity, which has brought misunderstanding and hardship to Africans. Well, the Africans believe in one single creator, the only one true God, while all others are messengers, including the great Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Moses, Abraham. These were all messengers. We have only one true God. But today, we've been asked by Euro Christianity to also say and believe that Jesus Christ, a creator of God, the handiwork of God, is also a creator. And this has been the bane of Africa. And secondly, they brought about partisan politics, which they know is also sort of disturbing and worrying Africans. Africans believe in one nation, one people, one destiny. When Nkrumah brought about this idea, he was hounded out by people from the Western Hemisphere that he has brought about one party state. But my brother, let's look around the world. Every nation that has made it, which is what its source, has passed through that stage before. In Africa, we don't understand partisanship. We see opposition as being an enemy. And we believe in community, empathy, and compassion. But that thing was relegated to the background after Nkrumah was overthrown. Nkrumah wanted to broaden and expand the African idea of community, empathy, and compassion. Hence, we have this clarion call, comradeship and forbearance, that we were all in the same boat. We were all fighting for the same cause. So therefore, we shouldn't have an opposition to nation building. But the elites at the time, and as we have today, were organized to fight against Kwame Nkrumah and the other brave warriors. They looked at where we found ourselves. Africa, we don't know who and where to turn to now. Sad that in the history of African emancipation, there are countless number of sad occurrences that can never be forgotten by any true African. And one of such incidents, which of course is a major one, is the overthrow of the government of Osagefyo Kwame Nkrumah, a government whose crime in the distorted and perverted view of the imperial forces that made the coup d'etat was that it sought to overthrow vice, ignorance, crime, neocolonialism, and poverty in Ghana. Ever since that coup took place, we can't actually overthrow the First Republic. Comfort, deepening social, economic, and political inequalities in Ghana. Imperial forces. And that the policies have not improved the conditions of the lowest class in the essential of healthy, happy human life, which the government under Nkrumah sought to establish for all Ghanaians with the slogan, work. And it's so sad at hand. Am I online?
Yes.
Okay. We want the youth to know that the era of the First Republic of Ghana, what happens to be the most eventful period of Ghana and even Africa's history, have been hidden from the youth of today. And that is unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it is happening so. You see, the African spiritual system, which is the natural African spiritual system, as I've mentioned before, it's founded on the values of community, empathy, and compassion. That is high moral principles, which are the backbone of our spiritual, philosophical, and cultural heritage. And this was fully at play during Nkrumah and the warriors' time. During that time, the creation of a situation where there was no destitution and no one made an easy living, no luxurious life at the expense of others, but everyone could make a decent living, and no one able and willing to work was oppressed by the fear of want, became the preferred and desired order of the day when Nkrumah was put out to conscientize Ghanaians. You know, more or less vague or clear, these unprecedented visions and improvements that were born by Nkrumah were what gave the wonderful era of Osagefyo Kwame Nkrumah its incomparability. The First Republic administration under Nkrumah radically sank these virtues and ideals so deeply into the popular minds of the masses to change their thought pattern and character. Osagefyo and the other brave warriors creeps and removed the misconstruct, which the black man had is a consideration of the effect of the and indicated that Nkrumah system will allow distribution benefit all classes and make possible civilization. And that was the era that Sekou Ture and others from other countries. You know, we're saying this because we know others will talk about Comrade Sekou Ture, Kwame Ture, and others. But we want to just enlighten the youth a little more about more and Dubois. These were brave warriors who Africa for what they did for Africa. They put their lives at stake and made Africa become what we are today. Had it not been from a bad initiations and bad thinking from the Western Hemisphere, Africa might have today been somewhere more positive than we find ourselves today. It's unfortunate. And so, therefore, as revolutionaries, we should know and accept where we are, understand why we are presently in this position, and finally, to come up with visible solutions other than waiting for other people to tell us what to do. So the title for this thing is apt. If we cannot share our problems, we can't alleviate them, we should share them fully. We should know where we are, understand why we are presently in this position, and then come out with visible solutions other than waiting for other people to tell us what to do. For although colonization doesn't exist today in terms of physical ownership of countries, the mentality of the Western Hemisphere, the Western world in relation to Africa is still very colonial. You know,
There's somebody
through
has
our
their mic
activities.
on. Could you turn your mic off, please?
Okay, thank you.
Brother Omari?
Because, you know, hello,
Yes. Brother
Omama,
Omama?
yeah,
Uh, could
hello,
you
brother.
could you try to wrap it up, brother? We have to move on to other speakers.
Yeah, we're wrapping it up.
Thank you.
See the problem of our elite, the African elite today, is that through their actions and descriptions, they tend to put a lot of people in a state where they think they are poor. And the poverty of the mind is more insidious than the material poverty. And this is what the African elite, the harm they are causing to Africa. So if we claim to be Pan-Africanists and revolutionists, I think we should concern ourselves with the class of people who have become lackeys, pawns to the Washington consensus. It makes the African don't believe in himself anymore. But we have some extraordinary power of thought in us. And therefore, there's a need for African and awaken the power consciousness of the. This will lead the African into believing in himself and become confident that his ideas will not only work, but could also be beneficial to mankind. What needs to be done is to take action and initiate the power of action. So more grease the elbows of APRPGC branch, more grease the elbows of fellow comrades in arms, Pan-Africanists, notable Bob Brown, for the cause of the African. And then we're working hard towards the real emancipation of the African, brother. So the Osagefyo youth movement, thank you all for getting us on and letting us reach out to the world. Thank you, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother
Bamboo
Omami
Shango,
from
brother.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
brother. From the Osagefyo Youth Movement, brother Omama.
Youth movement. Yeah. Thank you, brother.
Okay. Can you hear us, brother Maurice?
Yeah, I can hear you. How y'all
Okay,
doing?
we're doing good, bro. The mic is
Good, good.
yours.
You wanted me to start, Brother Bamboshi?
Yes, please.
All right, how's everyone doing?
Doing good.
Good, good, good. And thank you, brother AAPRP GC for inviting me to talk about Lumumba on the day of the commemoration of our brother Kwame Ture. I'll speak a little bit about Lumumba, but I'll spend most of my time talking about what the children of Lumumba are doing. That is to say, not his biological children, but his ideological children, and the work that we're continuing in this tradition. Like Brother Kwame Ture, Lumumba was heavily influenced by Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Toure. There's a book written. It's called The Selected Speeches of Patrice Lumumba, and the foreword of that book was written by Jean-Paul Sartre. And in his foreword, Sartre made some interesting observations about Lumumba. And he said that you have to understand Lumumba came out of a special class of people in the Congo. What the Belgians did in their colonization of the country is, in order to maintain control over the masses, they created a particular class of Congolese. They called them the évolués, or the evolved Congolese. And Lumumba was a part of the évolués. And the reason for existing on the part of the évolué, or the evolved, was to integrate into the Belgian colonial system. That is to say, a class of technocrats that would not really challenge the current order, but find their place in the current order. And that's what Lumumba, that milieu that Lumumba came out of. Now, when Lumumba went to the All African People's Conference in 1958, it was there that Lumumba was radicalized, that he became a staunch nationalist and a Pan-Africanist. And if you read Lumumba's speeches, his poetry, his writings, before 58, before the All African People's Conference, you find that he, probably the best way to describe it, in the empire, he was more like an integrationist as opposed to a nationalist and a Pan-Africanist. So in meeting Kwame Nkrumah, in meeting Sekou Toure, Lumumba was radicalized. And within a matter of weeks, really, in getting back from the conference, the All African People's Conference in 1958, we find Lumumba mobilizing the masses, organizing in a fundamentally different way than he did before. So not only was he radicalized at the All African People's Conference, but he was also supported, right? So he saw, he was struck by Kwame Nkrumah and saw Kwame Nkrumah as a father figure. And then, as you know, both Nkrumah and Toure, they were dispatching revolutionaries to different front lines in the anti-colonial fight. So Toure dispatched, in an effort to support Lumumba, dispatched Félix Moumié from Cameroon, all of you are familiar with, and another Pan-Africanist that some of you may not be familiar with, André Blouin. André Blouin was a staunch Pan-Africanist. She supported Toure in his mobilizing of the Guinean masses to reject the French and the French's referendum, where you had to either vote yes to be a part of, remain a part of the France sphere's influence, or no. So André Blouin was a key organizer along that Toure recruited because of her work that she did in organizing against de Gaulle's ultimatum that he gave the colonial outposts. So both Moumié and André Blouin was dispatched to Congo by Toure. So here on the one hand, you have Lumumba drawing strongly from being radicalized by Nkrumah and drawing from Nkrumah's Pan-African vision. And on the other hand, being supported by Toure. And André Blouin actually wound up being the chief of protocol of Lumumba. And she wrote an excellent book called Africa, My Country. So Kwame Ture, Kwame drawing his name from Kwame Nkrumah, Toure drawing his name from Ahmed Sekou Toure. Kwame Ture took on the name of these two African giants, and Lumumba embraced them and took on the Pan-African vision. And in fact, when we see the Lumumba returning back to the Congo in 1950, 1958, and then being radicalized through a series of organizing efforts in Kinshasa in particular, what we find is that Lumumba is now firmly ensconced in the nationalist and Pan-Africanist tradition. And he draws upon Toure, he draws upon Nkrumah in advancing the Congo. Now, you know, many of you may know that Toure and Nkrumah saw Congo as vital to the Pan-African project. In fact, in the introduction of, I think one of the recent copies of the book that Nkrumah wrote on Congo, The Challenge of the Congo, he lays out how an agreement that Nkrumah had with Lumumba, where Congo, or Leopoldville at the time, Kinshasa today, would serve as the capital of the United States of Africa. Now, if you understand about the strategic location of the Congo, its enormous wealth, its the ability to project power anywhere on the continent from the Congo, then you understand why Toure and why Nkrumah saw Congo as central to the Pan-African project. So the centrality of Congo to the future of Pan-Africanism, to the future of Africa, remains the same today. And the ideas of Lumumba, of a self-sufficient, self-determined Pan-African Congo, is still very much intact today with the Congolese youth. And that's what I really want to focus on and talk about, how the youth in the Congo are carrying on the tradition of not only Lumumba, but also Nkrumah, also Toure, and in very concrete ways. And they've established a training center in Kinshasa, and they named that training center the André Blouin Center. And in that center, the youth are trained in 4 principles. Their training is grounded in 4 principles. The first is self-sufficiency. Second is self-determination. The third is Pan-Africanism. And the fourth is internationalism. Now, not only are they grounded in the ideological framework of those 4 principles, but in everything that they do, they fulfill on those principles. So they have self-sufficient projects. When they mobilize the masses in doing political education, it's about self-determination. That's a central feature of the training and the teaching that they conduct in local communities, not only in urban areas in the Congo, but also in rural areas. As many of you know, much like the rest of Africa, the majority of the population is 60 to 70% is found in rural areas. So the youth go into the rural communities in order to do those training. When it comes to Pan-Africanism, they participate in Pan-African schools and exchanges in Tanzania, in Ghana, and in South Africa. And they do that throughout the year. Of course, the coronavirus has interrupted that exchange, so they've moved that to a virtual, the exchanges to a virtual platform. So their concern is not just about the Congo, and they understand clearly that the Congo is a European construct. It's a country that was not designed or created by Africans. In fact, just about all the countries we see on the African continent today weren't created by Africans, at least in terms of their political borders. Those were created by Europeans. So they're clear that although they call themselves Congolese and their political foundation is based in nationalism, that Pan-Africanism is the answer for bringing about the kind of self-determination that they want to see, not only in the Congo, but on the African continent as a whole. So they're keen to engage with other youth who are Pan-Africanists and have the same aims. And finally, on the internationalism front, they see what's unfolding or what has unfolded in Latin America over the last 2 decades as a model to follow. Chavez in Venezuela loom large in their thinking. Cuba, of course, is central to how they see that the battle that is needed to be waged against imperialism. And of late, they've been strongly inspired by the mass mobilization and the rejection of imperialism on the part of the Bolivian masses. And they host forums at the center that connect with youth in Latin America, in Brazil, in Venezuela. Certainly, they are connected to the youth in Haiti. So these young people in a country that is majority youth, Congo, the median age is 17, are carrying on the tradition of Patrice Lumumba. And really that's my purpose here today, to share with you that what Kwame Ture fought for, what Kwame Nkrumah fought for, what Sekou Toure fought for, is being, that legacy is very much alive among the Congolese youth. In order for you to get a sense of what they're doing, how they're carrying on the struggle for a free and liberated Congo and a free and liberated Africa, I highly encourage you to visit the website Telema, T-E-L-E-M-A. It's a Lingala word, which means rise up or stand up. So telema.org, T-E-L-E-M-A. I don't know if I can put it in the, I'll put it in the chat later. But that's the main focus, Brother Bamboshi, for today, just to share that the work is being done. It is being carried on. It's being carried on by a new generation of young Congolese who are steeped in the history of the Congo, in the history of the African continent, who are Pan-Africanists, who understand that free and liberated Congo and Africa is one that is grounded in socialism, grounded in the United States of Africa, and it's that vision that they're fulfilling on each and every day. So just wanted to share that with the collective. And if I don't know what the format is, if there are any questions, I'll gladly respond to it. But other than that, I just thank you for giving us the opportunity to come in and share with you the work that we're doing primarily in the Congo, but also elsewhere on the African continent.
Thank you, Brother Maurice. And please stand by. We'll see. We'll probably get to some questions after. I'd like to ask Mormi to check her chat. We're going to go to Gerald. Gerald, can you hear us?
You hear me now?
It's coming better though.
Could you hear me, brother?
Yeah, can you turn just a little bit louder?
Okay.
All
Yeah.
right. We want to know if you could introduce yourself, Gerald,
Yeah. First
and
of all,
give us information.
First of all, I'd like to apologize to every member of the forum for this technical. You'll excuse me, my age. I'm technologically underdeveloped. Anyhow, I'm Gerald Perreira. I'm the chair for the Organization for the Victory of the People. It's a political formation in Guyana that is committed. We have a revolutionary Pan-African perspective. And of course, I would like to, in dealing with the revolutionary Pan-African perspective, I would like to, as I go on, to differentiate between that and what we call it, some of the Pan-African formations. As you know, in Guyana, we have many political parties on the political landscape, but every one of them are committed to neoliberal economics. And the two major parties, the two major political parties, one which was founded by the People's Progressive Party, which used to be describe itself as Marxist-Leninist, and the PNCR, which at the time under Forbes Burnham claimed it was socialist. Both of these parties today are quite happy with pursuing neoliberal economics that was imposed in this country by the World Bank, the IMF, and the US government. So what we have is all of the parties, with the exception of us, are pro-capitalist and very imperialist friendly. The OVP is Pan-Africanist, we're socialist and anti-imperialist. We contested elections twice, 2015 and 2020 at the regional level. To get our message out, that is our primary reason for contesting, was to get our message out to the people, and we did reasonably well in the region that we contested. But now, after the elections, with all the chaos of what has happened, there's a tremendous move over to our organization. Because one of the things we have learned, brothers and sisters, and you will agree with, is Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Patrice Lumumba, Robert Sobukwe, and my friend, mentor, and teacher, Kwame Ture, taught us that as revolutionaries, we must be principled. Our principles must be non-negotiable. We can adjust our strategy and tactics, but our principles, we do not compromise it. Secondly, as revolutionaries, we must be clear as crystal. Because when we look at what is happening in the United States today, not that there was always that fascist tendency embedded in the United States, in the state, and the apparatus of the state, whether it's in the CIA, the FBI, and all of that. But today, what we're seeing is that Trump has emboldened it, and we're seeing all the far right groups and what is the so-called alternative right coming to the fore. Now, we, as revolutionary Pan-Africanists, how do we respond? So, I believe one of the things I believe when we look at what these leaders taught us is that we must draw the line between the fighting Pan-Africanists and the fake Pan-Africanists. So we have some weeding out to do. We have a lot of weeding out to do. Let me tell you what I mean. One of the reasons I admire tremendously the work of the AAPRP Guinea Conakry is over the years, its principled and consistent position in the tradition of those leaders that we're addressing, looking at today. When we look at great revolutionaries like Kwame Ture, Sekou Toure, Robert Sobukwe, and so. And we look at what we have now in Africa. You look at the Paul Kagame type in Rwanda, Yoweri Museveni in Uganda. These guys, they claim, and they've been able to fool a number of Pan-Africanists. These guys claim that they are Pan-Africanists, but we know they're not. In fact, those two leaders I just identified, along with the Klung, who's the president of Ghana, these guys are, they're all into neoliberal economics. They're all pawns of imperialism. And they have a number of organs. They're able to enlist the support of fake Pan-Africanists in the diaspora. And we have to identify these forces and beat them out, because some of them are working with the enemy and it's being financed by agencies linked to the enemy. So when we get back to these great revolutionary, these great African leaders we're talking about, such as Kwame Ture, Robert Sobukwe, and so these personalities, of course, embodied that revolutionary African personality. And one of the things that distinguished their revolutionary Pan-Africanism from the reactionary Pan-Africanism, or the bourgeois type, led by the bourgeois and neo-colonial elements, is that they linked Pan-Africanism with scientific socialist ideology. They have to go together. We can't preach and speak about Pan-Africanism while we pursue so-called free market economics. We cannot speak about Pan-Africanism and operate, are quite contented to maintain the neo-colonial arrangement. And this is what distinguishes us from the others. So, Kwame Ture, for example, he spoke about consistently about the need for permanent organization and the need for work study, not only for our cadres, but to do this type of work in our communities and among the people, because there's no substitute for this type of hard work. And we have to be, as I said earlier, we have to be crystal clear. So what is it we are advancing when we speak about the scientific socialist perspective? Because very often when we say scientific socialism, the mechanical Marxists, or what you call the Eurocentric Marxists, or the old Soviet type Marxists, they say, well, look, they use them as the words as in the terms interchangeably. So if you're a scientific socialist, then you're a Marxist-Leninist, and if you know, and we disagree with that, because as Kwame Ture always pointed out, that he was fond of saying that Newton didn't discover the laws of gravity; he observed something. So Marx observed something, but these were laws that existed independently of Marx and were centuries before Marx. So with a scientific socialist ideology, we are not, it doesn't mean that we are Marxists. And of course, Marx made a contribution that no one can deny. But as Africans in the diaspora and in the motherland, the application, the way we apply our ideology must take into account our historical the historical conditions as well as our present circumstances. And as Sekou Toure said, our ideology must emerge out of our culture. And what we have is, when we look at the works of Sekou Toure and Kwame Nkrumah, and we examine the work that Kwame Nkrumah wrote in philosophical, his approach in what is called consciencism, we will see that a lot of what he wrote went beyond, far beyond Marxist, Leninist orthodoxy and the mechanical Marxism that dominates a lot of the white left holds on to. I mean, as someone who did theology and has a deep interest in Black liberation theology, it was refreshing and it it's also creative to see that as a religious, as a people who are very spiritual and people who come from diverse religious backgrounds, whether it's Yoruba, Islam, Christianity, or Judaism, we see no contradiction between revolution and religion. In fact, we believe that authentic or true religion, because we had the great Iranian scholar Ali Shariati wrote a book called True Religion versus False Religion. And we know that all of the prophets that came out of Africa were prophet revolutionaries. And they challenged the unjust order of their time. But what always happened is that in the initial stages, we know that the message of the various prophets were met with hostility by the priestly caste and the ruling political elites, as well as the business elites at the time. So they persecuted them. But when the message eventually triumphed, many of those who opposed the prophets then accepted those various faiths. They accepted it with their mouths, but not with their hearts and minds. And we've seen through the centuries where that has led us to. Because when we look today, we have revolutionary Pan-Africanists. We have to reclaim the revolutionary message of the prophets and the revolutionary message of emancipatory religion. Because when you look at what groups like ISIS or Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram is doing in Africa, it has nothing to do with the revolutionary message of Islam. In fact, we know that these people are being used by the Zionists and being used by imperialism as a way to balkanize and to divide and destroy, to divide and ruin Africa so that the imperialists can maintain their stranglehold. So we have to reclaim, we have to challenge them. It's the same way that the Black liberation theology challenges the bogus theology of the T.D. Jakes and the likes. Because what we have is two religions. One, the religion of truth, the religion of justice, and the religion of liberation versus the pseudo-religion of oppression, etc., etc. So when I look at what Brother Kwame Ture taught, when we look at what Sekou Toure dealt with and did addressing revolution and religion, I am proud of such leaders that we have and that we've learned tremendously from them, and we have to take their vision, where they left off. We have to take this further. We have a lot of work to do, and I think the way forward is for us to work collectively and in where it is possible to build chapters of the AAPRPGC. And we need more seminars like this, more getting together so that we could coordinate, because the struggle is global, but we will hold down our end at the local level. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Le nouveau complot. Il s'agit de la continuation du même et seul complot.
So here he's saying that, in fact, this conspiracy is not a new conspiracy. It is, in fact, a continuation of a conspiracy which embodies the fundamental difference.
Celui-là qui s'inscrit dans la contradiction devenue fondamentale entre les options socialistes faites par le peuple de Guinée
between the socialist options presented by the people of Guinea
et les prétentions illégales de certaines puissances qui voudraient
and
la Guinée
the illegal claims of certain powers who would maintain their interest in Guinea, despite the will of the people.
malgré sa volonté dans un carcan d'exploitation favorable à leurs intérêts particuliers. La dernière fois, nous savons qu'il y avait notamment l'Allemagne fédérale
Last time we know that Germany,
le Portugal,
Portugal,
la France,
France,
deux pays
won't be named,
aidés par la
helped
5e colonne impérialiste organisée en Guinée
by the 5th
qui
Imperial
était à
Column
la
organized in
base
Guinea
de l'agression du 22 novembre.
that was behind the attacks
Les
on
mêmes
the
forces
22nd of November.
coalisées contre l'indépendance guinéenne
The same
n'ont pas
force
tiré les leçons de leur forfaiture et continuent
went
encore
against Guinea
le long de nos
and did not
frontières
learn its lesson
des préparatifs.
and are at the frontiers.
Les complots que nous avons connus ont été commencés grâce à l'appui impérialiste.
The conspiracies that we have known have been, how do you say, brought in by the imperialist powers,
Avec la complicité des nôtres,
but with the complicity of Africans.
dans le discours dernier, véritables ennemis de l'Afrique,
The true enemies of Africans are Africans that are
tous
ignorant.
les Africains exprimaient la même volonté,
Because if all the
la
Africans
même volonté
express the same will to be,
ne pourrait pas du tout réaliser son destin,
imperialism could not at all realize its destiny,
à savoir dominer le continent africain.
and could not be able to dominate the African continent. Here, the interviewer asked Sekou Toure about the decision of President Ahmed to not dispatch him to prison in South Africa, and whether this would not cause a conflict within the continent.
Pour notre part,
For our part,
le dialogue dont il s'agit signifierait trahison des intérêts supérieurs de l'Afrique.
any dialogue with South Africa in this case would be tantamount to treachery against African interest on the continent.
Nous ne sommes pas prêts, nous Guinéens, et je dirais plus, nous Africains,
We are not ready as Guineans or as
nous ne sommes
Africans,
pas prêts à accepter
not ready to accept
un dialogue quelconque avec ceux qui exploitent, oppriment odieusement nos frères.
the dialogue with people who exploit our brothers
Et qui ont la prétention
and who have plans
de s'ériger au-dessus des populations
to erect
propriétaires
themselves
naturelles
on top of the indigenous population
du sol,
of the
par
soil
la force des baïonnettes,
by the force of bayonets.
la ruse, qui sont arrivés à accaparer.
All right. So I guess to summarize his point, Sekou Toure was essentially speaking on the self-determination, first of all, of the African people of Guinea. And he pointed out, as many have after him and before him, that in fact, the greatest enemy of Africa is in fact ignorant Africans that are not abreast on knowledge of self. And he puts forth the familiar idea that unity is a unified Africa would definitely not be able to fall in the pitfalls of imperialism, neocolonialism, and calls upon that, of course, in Guinea, and ends off by rejecting a dialogue with apartheid South Africa, which, of course, does not stand for any Pan-African ideals, or did not stand for any Pan-African ideals, and one might say does not stand for them today as well. So that is essentially what that video entailed. I know I wasn't able to translate at pace. I'm not a professional translator, but I hope I was able to give everyone an idea of what took place there.
Brother Samari, thank you very much.
You did
Brother,
good, Brother Summary. You did good, bro.
Brother Nemo was also standing by to translate. I don't know if Brother Nemo want to make any observation.
He did great. He said everything as though he didn't translate all of the words, but then, yeah, it was good. I think anybody who listened to what he said should understand properly what he had to say and what Sekou Ture said.
Thank you, bro. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
At this point, we want to go
Brother
to...
Boshi?
Yes.
Brother Boshi, there was a question on the chat from someone asking about if Brother Perreira could say a little something about Walter Rodney and his
Yes,
life.
can we hold the questions?
Okay.
We got one more presenter, Brother Untu, and then after that, we'll go into question and answers.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks.
Mutu Moyusi. I'm the presenter for the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC. Kwame Ture transitioned to join our revolutionary ancestors on November 15th, 1998. His political life was one of struggle and sacrifice, service and suffering for the masses of African people. Kwame, like all men and women, was not born a revolutionary, but true to the science associated with the struggle to destroy all forms of exploitation and oppression, and with his sincerity to follow the path of truth and justice, grew ideologically and developed a Pan-Africanist and Nkrumah Toureist revolutionary character. We honor Kwame Ture and other revolutionary women and men, not as a cult of his or their personalities, but to recognize and foster emulation for the African masses of his and others' revolutionary theory and practice, to struggle to emancipate and transform African people and oppressed humanity for the vestiges of capitalism, imperialism, Zionism, settler and neo-colonialism, racism, and xenophobia. On behalf of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC, we would like to thank our host, our honored guest. They are our allies in struggle and service for helping make this Kwame Ture commemoration a success. It was they who have elaborated on the actions, beliefs, values, and principles that characterize a unity of thought and action where we find harmony with Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Patrice Lumumba, Robert Sobukwe, and Kwame Ture in the African Revolution. These men, representing the righteous and just aspirations of our people, are ideologically and organizationally connected, and that they all helped found and play an exemplary leadership role in the building of the revolution of Pan-Africanist political parties, fighting for the total and complete emancipation of African people, particularly with emancipation of African women. They held a common understanding that Pan-Africanism was the only objective that unified and liberated African people worldwide. They held a common understanding that it was only the political educated and organized African masses that had the desire and would benefit the most from the realization of revolutionary Pan-Africanism. They held a common understanding that Africa must be socialist, as they were enemies of exploitation and oppression. Africa developed culturally, politically, socially, and economically based on the creative genius, gender, and class struggle of and between African people. Empire growth and development throughout Africa attest to this fact. Why is this important? Nkrumah clarifies, in the new African Renaissance, we place great emphasis on the presentation of history. Our history needs to be written as the history of society, not as a story of European adventures. African societies must be treated as enjoying its own integrity. Its history must be find its place in this history only as African experience. If as a crucial one. At the same time, to deny class struggle in Africa is to deny African history and Africa's role in the world history. Ahmed Sekou Toure underscores this ideological principle by clarifying that Pan-Africanism is henceforth the class struggle at the level of Africa and of her external branches. Being not conscious about it would be exposing ourselves to a confusion that imperialism would not miss exploiting. The imposition of neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, imposed the colonial borders coming out of the Berlin Conference in 1884 to 1885 and interrupted Africa's movement towards continental growth and development not necessary to liberation and socialism. We suffer politically, nationally, economically, culturally, and socially from imperialist imposed borders to this very day. However, these men whom we honor today followed the path of revolutionary continental African unity, the emancipation of women and youth, scientific socialism, the political education and organization of the African masses into mass political parties, African nationalism, anti-imperialism, and the Pan-African nature of African identity. This unity of thought and action must become an everyday occurrence amongst the masses of African people. Nkrumah and Kwame Ture always argue that organization decides everything. These men, ideologically and organizationally, were merely revolutionary Pan-Africanist examples of the human transformation, the new man and woman needed at the level of the African masses worldwide. They all paid the price for their convictions and the refusal to compromise on principle. It is this insight, this understanding that Europe, including the US and Asian capitalism and imperialism and Zionism, were and are the primary enemies of Africa in this period of history. Pan-Africanist Kwame Nkrumah was in prison when he was elected as the first president of Ghana. It was Nkrumah who, on a podium in his Independence Day speech, spoke to the Guyanese masses in Africa, saying, "The independence of Ghana is meaningless without the total liberation and unification of the African continent." A socialist and ardent advocate and practitioner of Pan-Africanism and a staunch anti-imperialist, had numerous assassination attempts on his life. Following the publication of Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, in the fall of 1965, his government was overthrown February 21st, 1966, by the Guinean anti-people's class, US and British imperialism and Zionism. Pan-Africanist Sekou Toure also faced numerous assassinations of the Guinean counter-revolution and imperialism. While alive, the Guinean anti-people's class was able to impede the progress of the Guinean revolution. As the revolution was struggling to build deeper roots in the Guinean people, the counter-revolution was also being organized with the assistance of European and Asian imperialism. The People's Revolutionary Party of Guinea was a victim of a military coup d'etat following the death of Ahmed Sekou Toure. Many of the leading cadre of the Democratic Party of Guinea, PDG, were murdered. The Guinean military seized power with the support of imperialism, and Guinea is now dominated by neocolonialism. But Ahmed Sekou Toure still lives in the hearts and minds of the people of Guinea. The Congo is the heart of Africa, rich with mineral, agriculture, and human resources. The Congo was first colonized by Portugal and later by Belgian colonialism committed against humanity there. Pan-Africanist Patrice Lumumba, after being elected prime minister of the Congo, met with Kwame Nkrumah, and it has been documented that in the course of the discussion, President Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and Prime Minister Lumumba reaffirmed their determination to work in the closest possible association with the other independent African states for the establishment of a union of African states, with a view of liberating the whole continent of Africa from colonialism and imperialism. The response by imperialism was swift and unequivocal. Lumumba was assassinated on January 17, 1961, by the Congolese anti-people's class, US-headed sitting President Dwight Eisenhower and newly elected President John Kennedy's South African mercenaries in the Belgian intelligence and military. Pan-Africanist Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe was feared by the occupiers of Azania. On April 6, 1959, just 4 months following the African People's Conference, he founded the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, PAC. The PAC politically educated and organized the masses, and by example showed with the program of Action and Defiance campaign the impact of mass organized action against the colonial settler regime. Following the massacre of our people on March 21st, 1960, with 69 murders and 180 shots at Sharpeville and Langa, the PAC founded POQO, the Azanian People Liberation Army, to wage military war against settler colonialism. For his relentless revolutionary work and his unwillingness to abandon the just national cause of African emancipation and the reclamation of the land and all that was on it, Sobukwe was in prison on March of 1960, kept in solitary confinement, and was not released until 1969. Once released from prison, he was placed on house arrest and was denied basic human and national rights until his death on February 27, 1978. Pan-Africanist Kwame Ture was born into a family that at a time of anti-imperialism and labor activism in Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and the world. From a young age, Kwame showed compassion for the oppressed and those who stood for them. Kwame grew ideologically and politically through his life. His commitment to the struggle of our people was cemented as a 9-year-old child in Trinidad and Tobago, his teenage years in New York while he was a student at Howard University, and during his role as an organizer for the NAG, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Mississippi Democratic Party, Lowndes County Freedom Organization, and the Black Panther Party. Kwame never stopped struggling and growing ideologically, which engendered his opportunity to attend the first conference of the Organization of Latin American States in Cuba, Vietnam, Algeria, and then work as a secretary for Kwame Nkrumah and guided by Ahmed Sekou Toure. Kwame was instrumental in laying the ideological table for the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. The AAPRP-GC inherits and continues to work from this table and to advance Kwame's theory and practice, and to continue and advance our own work and practices. Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Patrice Lumumba, Robert Sobukwe, and Kwame Ture were all Pan-Africanists, meaning they all understood that it was only through Pan-Africanism that African people could and will be free. They all understood that all people of African descent are Africans. They all saw the necessity of mass organization and were inspired to found or help found a revolutionary Pan-Africanist political party. They were all socialists, anti-capitalist, and anti-imperialist. They all choose to consciously serve, suffer, and sacrifice for the masses of the people. The ideological struggle and the revolutionary struggle for Pan-Africanism is the primary struggle, understanding that theory and practice present one reality. Sekou Toure stated it most precisely: without revolutionary consciousness, there can be no revolution. Those we honor today exemplified our commemoration, ideological theme. If Africa's children cannot alleviate her suffering, we can at least share them fully in life and until death. So today, in commemorating the revolutionary life of Kwame Ture, it is fitting that we honor those who struggled and suffered, survived, and sacrificed for the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. These men are merely examples of African women and men who came to understand that the liberation of African people would never be realized without Pan-Africanism. The AAPRP-GC is clear that it is the masses of our people who ultimately make history, and Sekou Toure taught us that the role of a genuine popular revolution is to enable the people to make history. Today, neocolonialism is entrenched in Africa and throughout the African world. Neocolonialism in Africa and throughout the African diaspora is the primary enemy of Pan-Africanism today. In the past, the anti-people class, with the active assistance of imperialism, led Pan-Africanist efforts to unite Africa were from the governments down. It is clear that this approach was a failure. Pan-Africanism can only be achieved through the revolutionary political education and organization of the African masses worldwide. The task at hand must address some facts. Today, the African masses lack revolutionary consciousness and insight into the unquestioned necessity of Africa to unite as one. Today, the masses of our people lack a revolutionary consciousness that there is only one socialism, and that is scientific socialism, and it is in harmony with the history and culture of traditional communal Africa. Today, the masses of our people lack revolutionary consciousness as to our enemies are and who our allies are. Today, the masses of our people lack revolutionary consciousness as to the class struggle in Africa and the African diaspora between the people and the anti-people's class. Today, the masses of our people lack revolutionary consciousness that the emancipation of African people is impossible without the emancipation of African women. Today, the masses of our people lack revolutionary consciousness that all people of African descent, no matter where in the world they were born or live, are African and belong to the African nation. Today, the masses of our people lack revolutionary consciousness that we must organize as never before, for organization decides everything. Kwame Ture never tired in saying that our primary task for this era in history is the revolutionary political education and organization of the masses of the people. Kwame also never tired in proclaiming that if you're not working for your people, you are working against your people, and that the role of the conscious is to make the unconscious conscious. The AAPRP-GC understands that we can mobilize our people around issues, we are clear that capitalism, imperialism, women's oppression, ageism, racism, Zionism, and xenophobia, settler-colonialism, and neocolonialism are all enemies of Africa and her diaspora operating under one umbrella. We know that until the system of capitalism and imperialism is destroyed and Pan-Africanism realized, African people will never be free. Therefore, the masses of our people must be organized around a common objective and common ideology, as Nkrumah is clear, for an ideology does not seek merely to unite a section of the people, it seeks to unite the whole of the society in which it is found. It is common to hear we must have unity. But again, Nkrumah made it clear that unity presupposes organization, revolutionary unity. The AAPRP-GC is unwavering that Nkrumhism, Toureism is the correct ideology around which to organize African people in the African Revolution for Pan-Africanism, the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. We offer to you the All African People's Revolutionary Party GC and our allied organizations as radical and revolutionary options for you to join in the revolutionary struggle following the tradition of revolutionary Pan-Africanist Africa to study and work, struggle and suffer, sacrifice and serve the African masses and the African Revolution. There is no greater human attribute that can harbor than that of revolutionary struggle and revolutionary service to the masses of our people and against the anti-people's class in Africa, the African diaspora, and through the world. Like Kwame Ture, we promise you nothing but long, hard struggle, sacrifice, suffering, and victory is inevitable, but not in your lifetime. We are a small organizers who have refused to abandon our efforts to build a mass, all-African political party with uncompromising capacity and willingly educate and organize the masses of African people worldwide. Only death ends our contribution on this side. However, our legacy reaches eternity. If you are ready to learn, if you are ready to struggle and serve, sacrifice and suffer, if you love Africa and African people, join us on this lifelong journey of conscious struggle and service to our people, no matter in the world where you might live. We also ask you to join and help build those organizations that have joined us today, for they represent frontline fighters confronting our common enemies. The AAPRPGC expresses its appreciation for our listeners and viewers for having taken this time to be with us today and to contribute to the ideological seminar. A very simply yet powerful message. If Africa's children cannot alleviate her suffering, we can at least share them fully. Long live the revolutionary legacy of Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, Patrice Lumumba, Robert Sobukwe, and Kwame Ture. Long live the revolutionary struggle for Pan-Africanism, victory to the liberation of African women and youth, victory to the liberation of oppressed humanity, death to imperialism, racism, and Zionism. Help build the AAPRPGC, build our allied organizations. We thank you. Habadigani, we're ready for revolution. The victory is for us, even though not in our lifetime. The All African People's Revolutionary Party GC. Kwaheri.
Thank you, Brother Ntu. Brother Walimu, I think you are going to host the question and answer section, which begins now. Brother Walimu.
Yes, if I think there was a question that was asked of Brother Gerald to speak to the question of Walter Rodney, and so I guess we can open there. Is Brother Gerald,
you're muted.
Sorry. Yes, the question of Walter Rodney's legacy. Straight up answer. It's in tatters. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. If you come to Guyana, you will discover that Forbes Burnham, the man who founded the People's National Congress, that Walter Rodney fought against, is much loved and respected among the masses, the dispossessed masses, dispossessed poor African Guyanese. Walter Rodney's memory is more, it lives more with sections of the middle class, which is, it's really sad. But let me tell you what I'm talking about. So I was teaching at a high school when Walter Rodney returned to Guyana. And I had just moved on. I was an central executive member of the Young Socialist Movement, which was the youth arm of Burnham's party. And when Walter returned to Guyana, he established a small study group and he had invited me to it. And I went along and we had these discussions and so. But when they founded the Working People's Alliance, which was a number of left-wing organizations came together to challenge Burnham and the People's National Congress, the battle lines were clearly drawn. And there were a lot of contradictions, of course, at the time, because there was a strong right-wing element. There was a strong right-wing element in Burnham's party, the same way they had a strong right-wing element in Manley's PNP. And there were those of us who felt that, look, what we can do is the progressive forces, we should unite and concentrate on fighting the principal enemy or the main enemy, which is US imperialism. Because here you had three parties in Guyana, the PPP, the People's National Congress, and the WPA. Three parties that were claiming in their manifestos that they want to pursue a non-capitalist path to development. They were claiming the credentials, Marxist-Leninist credentials, and were opposed to imperialism. But what happened is my understanding of this, and I will say this, I'm not here to assassinate, I will never participate in any ideological assassination of Walter Rodney, but I think that Walter Rodney misread the situation in Guyana, because what we had at the time was Guyana was under tremendous pressure, Burnham was under tremendous pressure from the United States. Burnham allowed the Cuban troops, Burnham allowed the planes go into Angola to fight, to land in Guyana, to refuel and move on. Burnham sent the first set of assistance to help Maurice Bishop and the NGM and weapons and training. He trained the first set of soldiers, the first set of members of Maurice Bishop organization, the NGM, that participated in the overthrow of Eric Gary, the Gary regime. So here you had Burnham that had established his anti-imperialist credentials. We are sending small, although we were in deep financial and economic troubles, Burnham sent annually $50,000 to the freedom fighters in the frontline states. And Burnham took principal positions in the non-aligned movement for free Palestinian homeland. Burnham made sure that cricketers who played in South Africa, although they were able to play in other Caribbean countries, were declared persona non grata, could not play cricket in Guyana. And there were many progressive positions. But instead of, I was surprised, instead of someone like Walter Rodney having read Mao Zedong and the correct handling of contradictions, you would have seen Burnham regime as secondary, and let us focus on fighting, building a united front and confronting the enemy. But that did not happen. And today, fast forward, because I've written on this, I've written a piece called Half the Story Have Never Been Told. I'm going to circulate it to you on Walter Rodney. Today, you're asking about the legacy of Walter Rodney. The same Walter Rodney's organization, the WPA, at the time when Burnham was president, could not find common ground with Forbes Burnham. But when Burnham died and his party went full right wing, accepting the structural adjustment program of the World Bank and the IMF, full right wing, his Walter Rodney's colleagues and friends found common ground with the PNC when it became so imperialist friendly and promoter of neoliberal economics. In fact, I want to share this with you, brothers. Dr. Clive Thomas, who many of you have known as a respected third world economist who wrote many books on socialist transition and the authoritarian state. Clive Thomas became a leading figure in the Granger neo-colonial regime that implemented harsh taxation policies on the poor and given huge tax break to foreign white capital and big business. Good. And the piece that I want to insert here is that there were people, there were brothers and sisters who turned to the ruling party at the time and said, we should involve the OVP in the coalition because they're doing tremendous work in the depressed African communities. And Clive Thomas said, no. The OVP, that's our organization, the OVP, we cannot include them in the coalition. In fact, no one should even visit the OVP website. That the OVP is being watched by the CIA and the FBI. That is what he said. And when I heard that, I said, well, we're in damn good company because the FBI and the CIA were watching Malcolm X. And as Sekou Toure said, if the enemy is not bothering with you, then you're doing nothing. But if he's bothering with you, then you're doing something. But what I'm showing you is many of those who were in the WPA, who fought Burnham tooth and nail, they're all working for NGOs linked to the Canadian government, to the United States government, and to the British government. In fact, there is evidence in papers that have just been released that Walter Rodney, before he died, went to the United States Embassy, met with an embassy representative who was a CIA operative in the embassy, and told him that he felt that he would not be living, he will die soon, that his life is in danger, and if anything happened to his family, he would like the Americans to protect them. Now, I mean, you know, if I'm being threatened in Guyana, Gerald Perreira is not going to go to the US Embassy or to the British Embassy as a Pan-Africanist. If I want to get out here, my life is threatened, I will go to the Cubans, or maybe I'll go to the Venezuelans, but I won't be going to any one of the Western countries. So I'm just giving you this. So these are some of the contradictions. I mean, Walter was scholarly. He wrote the Groundings with My Brothers and How Europe on the Developed Africa. But his political, reading the political, what was happening at the time, he erred. And I think CLR James addressed that on in his piece, Walter Rodney, and the question of power. So today, the WPA evaporated. It's a party of not more than 6-7 persons, and they have discredited themselves because they have over the years supported policies that are anti-people, anti-working class, and they've said nothing. They've said nothing. They've not taken any position.
You trying to instigate a chase?
Yep. So
you trying to instigate a chase?
Hello. Yep.
Go ahead, Gerald.
Yeah, so, you know, one of our respected Pan-African elders from Trinidad, African Combo, he visited Guyana not too long ago, and he said, he asked the question of me. He said, one of the things he noticed in Guyana is the deep love for Burnham that you will find among dispossessed poor African Guyanese. And that's so. It's so because Burnham made a great contribution. No one can deny that. And it was unfortunate that Walter Rodney, as well as Burnham at the time, could not find common ground in the struggle against imperialism. And today, we're paying the price of that.
Yeah, I did have a question. Bambozi?
Yes.
I did have a question. Maybe Walimu can handle it. What is the correct handling of contradictions internal to a party and external to a party? And the second part is we got the brother-sister organization. You had an anti-Zionist United Front, and you had an African United Front. What is principle and functional unity? But the first one, I'm really interested because we keep falling by the wayside because of a number of different issues that have to deal with contradiction. So I want to understand, in the context of this talk today, what is contradictions and what is the correct application of contradictions in terms of resolving them, and what is functional unity and principle unity.
All right, let me ask Brother Maurice to mute himself. And I think Brother Walimu got the section.
Walemo.
Yes. In regards to the first aspect of your question in terms of contradiction, I think on behalf of GC, we see it like any dialectician in two ways. Contradiction amongst the people, as I understand it, and I'm referencing Ahmed Sekou Toure, is handled non-antagonistically. Politically and ideologically, it is handled through criticism and self-criticism. That is the methodology, as I understand it, within the context of revolutionary struggle. Now, contradictions between the people's class or the people and the anti-people's class or the anti-people is an antagonistic contradiction. And that contradiction is resolved through warfare.
What about internal to an organization?
Well,
you got a lot of splits in the PAC, BCMA. You got splits everywhere, and I'm not trying to delve into that, but I'm going to say why and how does that handle, and why does this keep reoccurring?
Well, I think like anything in life, in the process of growth and development, there are a myriad of different contradictions that may occur.
Okay.
I would suggest that they are ideologically driven.
Okay.
And to say that there are divisions or there are splits or whatnot is to not say that those are negative.
Okay.
When you don't agree, then you go your separate way. And I think what we have learned historically, though, is that that doesn't mean that when we disagree and go our separate ways, that we have to be enemies of each other.
Okay.
We have just chosen a different path.
Okay.
And ultimately, the masses of the people will determine what path they choose to follow. It might be neither. But I think that as long as we in revolutionary struggle stay focused on the task at hand, and that task is the organization of our people to destroy the system of exploitation by which they suffer, then we're fine. And that the other formations or those other organizations or parties that have split and gone in a different direction, that we help, they are also successful if they are genuinely fighting for the same objectives that they've laid before them when we were one. So I don't really see that as a contradiction. Even the APRP has had those same divisions. But we do not spend our energy on criticizing the past.
Right.
We spend our energies on trying to build on the future.
Okay, well, the second part of the question was functional unity and principle unity. Now, and I say that in the context of brother-sister organization, all African United Front, or anti-Zionist United Front. Now, when we talk about United Front, is that a functional unity or is that a principle unity? And what's the difference?
Well, principle unity, as I understand it, is that unity that's based upon ideology, where you have common, your relationship is based on common principles. So we talked earlier about scientific socialism. Well, that is a principle. Anti-capitalism or fighting, that's not a strategic question to be against capitalism. Being opposition to capitalism and for scientific socialism, those are principal questions. And so when you unite with other organizations that have that same position or view, then your relationship is now based on principle. And so that is an objective. That is something that we in the APRPGC want to do is to identify and find and work with those organizations that we agree with. At the same time, that there are organizations that you may not have the same principle, but you're fighting against or for some of the same things. For example, let's say some organizations, their focus is on the questions of political repression, FBI, CIA, some anti-militarism, AFRICOM, and US imperialism, military forces around the world. So they're not necessarily anti-capitalist, but they are opposed to some of the manifestations of capitalism. So on that basis, then we can work together, you know. And so Zionism is also one of those things that, you know, maybe we don't agree on everything, but we have in common that we are supporting the liberation of Palestine from Zionism, and we're against Zionism worldwide. And so if that is the only point of agreement, then based on that, we can have common activity, common program, common support. And in my mind, those types of relationships are functional, so to speak, or strategic, you know, because revolution, although it's very precise ideologically, we cannot be so mechanical that we cannot work with other progressive or radical organizations that may not agree with everything that we agree with. You know, ultimately, there are over 1 billion Africans in the world. And so there's going to be a myriad of expressions of how they're going to struggle against their oppression and exploitation. And we must be open enough to work with what the people produce to the best of our ability, based upon those things that we find ourselves in common.
Thank you, sir.
Next question. Well, it looks like we may not have any other questions. We
Yes,
don't have any on the board. Go ahead, bro.
For the sake of ideological struggle, can any of the online presenters today speak on the role, positive or negative, of monarchies and royal families in the class struggle in Africa, diaspora today?
Everybody hear the question? Okay.
Repeat that one more time.
Again, I'm asking for the sake of ideological struggle with regard to our presentation of some aspects of modern as well as our history, traditional history. I'm asking the question so we can clarify modern confusion based upon presentation of past history. The role of monarchies and royal families in Africa, as well as its diaspora, with regard to the class struggle.
Anybody want to take that question?
I will, you know, try to offer what I would suggest is a perspective as relates to GC. And I think we, you know, for us, we have to reference, again, Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Toure, etc. I think that's why Kwame had to write Class Struggle in Africa to help clarify the question that was raised as relates to monarchies and empire development in Africa. Because when I first started learning about Africa, I was taught to praise the emperors and the rulers and the pharaohs, etc., because it was something positive. But in studying history, we also see that where you have empires in Africa, similar to empires in any other part of the world, that the emperor does not dig the gold. The emperor does not dig the diamonds. The emperor does not grow the food. Yet the centralization of wealth finds itself in the family and with the monarchy. And I think that is consistent throughout Africa. And so we cannot, when we look at our history, following the breakdown of communal traditional African society, we can applaud the growth and development and the technology and the knowledge and science, etc., that happened within Africa as a positive. But we cannot negate the reality that that development was done at the hands and by the hands of the peasants, the artisans and workers of Africa. And they did not own and control what they produced. And this is the nature of class struggle. It has found itself in every society, I think, in which we have studied, including Africa. And that's why Nkrumah talks about scientific socialism being in harmony with the culture of Africa in its traditional and communal era. We are opposed to any system where those who work do not own and control the product of what they produce. And that's why I think when we listen to Sekou Toure, Sekou Toure said that the problems of Africa were within Africa because we had our people, African people who are allied with imperialism inside of Africa. And so we must also think that it's also true that with capitalism came to Africa, it also found allies based upon the stratification of society within Africa. But I think also we must say that the masses of our people, the harbors of our culture, were not for any form of oppression and exploitation. And that's what I offer to this discussion.
All right. It looks like we have ran over our time, and we would probably just like to recognize and thank a couple of people. We want to thank the folks who volunteered to do translation, particularly the Mormi, Brother Omari, Brother Summary, and Brother Nebu. We'd like to recognize again. We'd like to recognize again Brother Imhotep, who is there calling in from Jamaica because we know how difficult that is. We'd like to recognize Brother Alpha Yaya, who's calling in from Guinea, because we know that that is extremely ridiculously hard to do, and we need to find out from him how he was able to do that so that we could let Mr. Conde know. We see we also have Sister Starzad there, and I think we see a couple other folks. But we want to thank everybody, especially for participating and for allowing us to occupy this amount of time in your day. We know that there's many things you could have been doing, but instead you choose to share with us and listen to what our panelists had to impart to you. We also see that we have Sister Abina from the Maryland Council of Elders. Thank you, Sister. We'd like to ask each panelist if they have any last words that they would like to say before we close this out. And also ask Brother Alpha if he has any words he would like to say.
My brother, I would just like to add that when Kwame Ture was traveling through the Caribbean to deliver the message of Black Power, he was banned from every Caribbean country. There were only 2 countries that he was allowed to touch down in. That was Cuba and Guyana. And I had the opportunity, I was in the 6th form, and some of us, we went to hear him that afternoon. And little did I know that a few decades down the line, I would be working alongside him in Tripoli, Libya. The last presentation by the brother on royalty in Africa and the class struggle, I think we need a special discussion on that. It's more than that, very complicated, because there were many parts of African society where the concept of absolute royal absolutism did not exist. And those kings or chiefs were really accountable to the elders and the community, and so we need a special forum on that. Sometime we can have that, because I do agree with him, because what we find is that there's a tendency, right, on the part of some Afrocentrics to romanticize everything as though it was a golden dawn and it was just sitting there in imperialism. But as Brother Gaddafi said there, he spoke about the vacuum theory, which Sekou Toure identified, that there were those internal contradictions and those who collaborated with external forces, who collaborated with the enemy. So we need a special forum on that. Thank you.
Thank you, bro. Brother Maurice, would you like to say any last words? Brother Maurice, you're muted. All right, we're asking Brother Alpha Yaya if he would like to make any observation.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
First and foremost, I want to say sorry about my English, and I don't have many words to say after the speech of my brothers and sisters and uncle and auntie. I'm very happy to be with you today, and it is the honor for me to assist this show, this commemoration about my father and other revolutionary and Pan-Africanists. I don't have many words, but my father did when I was young. I was a young man, and with my personal research and questions with someone who works with him, I have to say Kwame Ture, of course, it is my biological parents. It is also my ideological parents because his activists influenced my life, you know. That's why I decide to follow his struggle, you know. So about my personal research, I want to say Kwame Ture was the one who understood from the start that we must no fighting for any integration, you know, but that we must fight against one white supremacy and give power, political power and economic power to blacks. And this fight is still relevant today, you know, and it's very important to remember that Kwame Ture fought his struggle beyond the borders of the United States. After the death of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, Kwame Ture was the hope of oppressed Black across the world and African Americans in particular. Being aware of this, he made it his mission to work for the organization and seeking of a liberation policy for his people, while advocating self-determination so that they take their destiny in hand. It's with this in mind that he says, I am not going to continue writing why my people need an organization on the ground. Hence, his attachment to the word organization, because for him, a real organization is all sector was necessary to obtain the power of the Black people needed to win. So about his Pan-Africanist, for me, I have always said Kwame Ture is the true definition of the Pan-Africanist. Why? Because you must first be proud to be African in your action before to leading any fighting for Africa. Pan-Africanism, by definition, is the liberation and is the total liberation and unification of all African under a scientific and socialist Africa. To be for me to be an Pan-African, you have to believe in African values, have believe fight in ideology. This doesn't mean that you have to reject ideas coming from outside, but Africa in the first, you know, that's the opposite of what we see in our various African countries. That is hate of the state through its hate of the state who stick to the Pan-African ethic, but the behavior is hit to opposite. I want to end with this. Kwame Ture He is the father of everyone who want to be free in your life, you know. So I would like to ask the people who work with him to keep talking about him, his goal and ideology for Africa, and because for me the best way to pay homage to a div is to talk about his whenever the opportunity arises. So I have to say that, and I'm very happy to be on in this family, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you very much. And so we're going to close. Walimu, do you have any last words for us?
Yes. Let me just say on behalf of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC, that we are extremely grateful, kind of reiterating what Bamboshi has offered earlier, but we're extremely grateful for your time today and for your listening to our guests. And again, we have to thank our guests because this is not possible without you. We are one in struggle. And as our brother Gerald said earlier, we have to find ways to do these things more often, where those like-minded of us can come together and help try to create more like-minded of us. If there's anyone who has interested in the APRPGC, they can go to our website at a-aprp-gc.org and click on the menu. We do have an application there that you would fill out, and we'll kind of go from there. But if you haven't heard anything from us that really inspires you to join us, we do follow Kwame's tradition. Join some organization that is working for our people. And again, we want to do this particular seminar at least every year, and to make it bigger and better, because we definitely when we transition to our ancestors, as Kwame showed us, you struggle to the end, and you leave legacy that those that you leave behind can follow and continue and advance. And we seek that same tradition in our own individual history and as an organization. And so again, we thank everyone, and ready for the revolution. There's victory for us, if not on our lifetime, hopefully that in those that come before us, or definitely with those who come after us. Thank you.
Thank you, bro. Brother Amatep, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you have any observation you would like to say? Make? Your mic is on, bro.
Yes, dear compañero Shango, sisters and brothers, we want to thank you once more again, for inviting us and for this wonderful presentation and, seminar. Well, basically, we do not have no question for the time being, and, nothing to add, no subtract. Just want to thank you all, So we thank you,
Thank you, bro. All right, with that, we're going to close out this seminar and hope that we'll come back together again very soon. Thank you.
Forward.
All right, ready.